Welcome back to Anne Max Another Story podcast. I'm just going to introduce the second part of our journey with Alice and her eating disorder. When we filmed, we thought it would be one podcast, but there was so much to talk about, so much I think that will educate me, you guys, that, you know, it is such a big thing and it is really overlooked. So there's two parts, and today we are doing the second part, so I hope you enjoy it as much and learn as much as you have from the first one. Where did life change? How did life change?
I think it's been an ongoing thing. There's no switch, because I quite often get asked, when did you recover? And I don't think there's an answer for that. There's no one day where you wake up and you go, do you know what, I've had enough of this, I'm not going to do this anymore. Every day I have to choose recovery, and I think that's something that I'll live with forever.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, I always say that, like I mentioned before, like I tried to separate the two, Alice and the eating disorder. I would come down and I would just say to my parents, Alice is really loud today, we're doing good. Or the eating disorder is really loud. I actually used to, because I had anorexia, I used to call her Anna. And I'd say, Anna's really loud today, I'm really struggling. And I think I say that now, I live with Alice and Anna in my head constantly. And it's about the toolbox that I now have. I can ensure that Alice is always louder. But there are days when Anna tries to turn herself up, and that's the way that absolutely. And like, especially when I'm going through periods of stress, like the way I dealt with stress and the way I deal with things was to control my food. So it's now a conscious effort for me to say, I know I'm going through something stressful, I need to prioritise maybe like meal prepping or something, taking away that ease of going, oh, I'm just not going to eat.
Not going to eat.
Yeah. But I think it's just that kind of understanding that you don't get rid of it and there's no cure.
Have you slipped back certain times?
Yeah, lockdown. Lockdown was a really hard time for me.
That was,
yeah.
Do you think that's because why do you think that was? And that's probably a bit of a silly question, because I think we all suffered differently with lockdown, but why particularly lockdown?
I struggled not being busy, and I think I deal with a lot of things by like keeping myself busy and all the things that I would do, socialising with my friends, going to the gym, keeping myself healthy, you know, going out for meals, going out for drinks, all of that stuff, that social side.
We had too much time to think, didn't we?
And all there was to do was exercise. So I massively went back into it. That was my way of coping with.
But never to that extent again. Having time to overthink maybe.
Yeah, and I think we had 2 full lockdowns, and I always say that when I look back at photos of myself now, I didn't see it again. But I got very thin again, and I think I always say if there'd have been a third lockdown, I could have been in trouble. That was like my biggest relapse. But going back to sort of like the turning point, or like when did recovery start to happen, I was in hospital for a 1.5 years full time. And
what you actually lived?
So as the day patient, so
that was a 1.5 years.
Yeah, that was a 1.5 years. And then I decided to discharge myself. Kind of what I said about the inpatient thing, it got to a point where I could go into therapy with all the others and say, oh, like, I didn't have dinner last night, and they'd be like, oh yeah, me either. Or I could go in and be like, I made myself sick last night, and they'd be like, yeah, me too. I was in this bubble of like the eating disorder behaviours were very normalised.
It was okay.
Yeah, and it was all, and obviously the therapists and the nurses there were like, well, that's not okay. But I was surrounded by a lot of people that were like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, don't worry about
it. And in the back of my head, I'd be like, well, if they're doing it, I need to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And it's a real weird position, because you're in an eating disorder unit, so you almost feel like you need to have an eating disorder. Although you're there to recover, there's that like line of like, well, if I'm coming here, then I need to have it still.
Yeah,
otherwise you wouldn't have chemo if your cancer's gone. 100%. So why am I still coming to an eating disorder unit if I'm getting better? So you can
give yourself like a false...
It's a real like complex that you have to fight with.
Saying, though, yeah.
So I kind of got to a point where I said to my nurse, like, I think I need to go and get a job or like have a purpose that isn't coming to hospital.
Talking about whether I ate or not.
Yeah, so I just got like a part-time job in a phone shop in Lakeside. And I was still an outpatient, so I still had to go.
Amazing though that you took that step.
Yeah, this was all after like my friend passing away and me just going, what am I doing? I'm spending my life inside a hospital. Like, for what?
And
like,
there's a big world
Holly's
out there.
Gone. She's never going to get the chance to recover. Like, it kind of does give you that little bit of like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So I did that for a little while. I was still an outpatient, so I still had to go to therapy, still had check-ins with my nurse, still had weigh-ins. And I did that for another 6 months. And then got to a point where they were happy for me to be discharged fully. And then this is kind of where I started the life that has led me to where I am today, which is a whole nearly 8 years of getting to this point. It was not a short story. So I started, as I said, like I wanted to go into a job where I'd been cared for the last 2-3 years of my life at that point, whether it be by my parents or the nurses, whatever. And I was like, I feel like I need to give something back.
You need to give back.
Yeah, and when I was younger, I always said that I wanted to work with children, but I didn't want to be a teacher, ironically. So I was looking around at jobs and applied to be a carer. So I worked with adults with special needs. They were independent living, so they live in their own houses, but they have carers with them.
What, when you say special needs, like autism, those sort of...
Yeah, so it was any...
Or
so
physical?
Both, so physical and intellectual. All different, varied like degrees of special needs. Some required like 24-hour support. Some I would just be going in to maybe do their dinner or their medication.
Yeah.
It varied depending on the client. So I did that for a little while, and I absolutely loved it. And then that led me to apply to do Camp America. So I went to work in Florida for 2 summers on an adult special needs camp. So a lot of people do the special needs.
How do you, just for someone that doesn't know, how do you get to do that? You apply?
So I went to like a open day. It was in London. And I didn't actually know at that point that I wanted to work on a special needs camp. I just wanted to go and do Camp America, and most camps are children camps. They're obviously it's for kids. And I went, and there was this stand, and it was called Quest Camp America. And there was like photos of like, I could see like wheelchairs and stuff, and obviously I worked with special needs at the time, and I was like, oh, that looks interesting, let me go and see. And they were doing on the day interviews, so I was like, oh, well, I might as well interview. I was like, I work with special needs now. I never worked in this country, I'd never worked with like personal care, so I'd never done like any of that sort of stuff. As I say, it was like an independent living, so they had a level of independence, but the camp that I worked on was a whole different ball game.
When you say personal, do you mean as in cleaning,
everything? Washing, taking them to the toilet? Right. They might have been in like nappies, so changing nappies, things like that. I'd never done any of that before. Like using hoists to like move them, lifting, all of that sort of stuff. And they were like, this is the array. Like they had campers with just maybe like autism or, you know, not physical, but it literally was the whole spectrum. There was anything that they opened it up to anyone. So that was a real eye-opener, because I'd never worked with that before. I did the interview, and they offered me a place on the day, and I took it. So
how soon did you go from that interview?
That was the April, I think, and then we went in the May. It was that very quick.
Quick question, it's me being a mum. How did your mum feel about you going?
Oh, she was terrified.
I just know
absolutely petrified.
All that goes in my head is, oh my God, what would I be like if it was my son?
So the camp was from May until September, and that was the time I could be in America. And we got a week off in the middle. So my parents said that I could go, and they booked a flight for that week. and they said if they came and I was underweight, if I'd lost weight, if I wasn't keeping well, they'd fly me home.
So they came?
Yeah, so they came in the middle week that I had
off.
When they came, I think they were very shocked. Probably been to America. I don't know if you've been to America, but the food, you know, anorexia and America don't really go together.
Then they don't go hand in. They don't.
The food was like, but this was the start of a whole different eating disorder. So I was still very restricting at that point. I wasn't eating. I would put on weight. I was a healthy weight to be discharged. But
so you're at Camp America, your mum and dad had flown home because all's looking good in the hood.
No, so I went out there and then they met me halfway through.
Get you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was there for like a month or so. Then they came and then
you.
Yeah.
Right.
So I had got myself to a healthy BMI. But if you remember when my BMI was too low, BMI is the worst thing to go by.
Yeah.
So on paper, if I have a healthy BMI, I'm still underweight for my height.
Did you hyper-focus on this BMI?
Yeah, so when I recovered to a healthy BMI, and then I was like, cool, I'm just going to stay here now. So my body, I was still fighting against my body. Naturally, my body weight should have been a bit higher just because everyone has a different set point. But I was like, well, my BMI is healthy, so I'm going to stay here. So I was stuck. It's called quasi-recovery. And it's basically the point where you get healthy to be discharged and then you stay there. So I was still having to, quote unquote, have an eating disorder. I was still having to restrict. I was to keep that body. It wasn't naturally where my body wanted to be. I was still having to restrict what I was eating, exercise, and all of those things.
Did you get ill again?
No, so I'd kind of got to a set point where I was like, I'm not gaining any more weight. It was more of a fear now of like, well, if I gain weight, then I'm not going to be healthy anymore, because they'd drummed it into me that like, you have to get to this healthy BMI. So I went to America, and obviously I'd spent the last, I don't know, 3-4 years restricting all of my food, and still being very, very controlled over what I eat. I used to take lunch boxes out with me with my food packed in and things like that, because I couldn't just go to a restaurant and order food because it would just scare me.
So you didn't lead that normal life?
Not yet, no, not yet. It was still very like controlled, and if I did eat in a restaurant, I would have rung ahead and been like, I'm coming, do you cook your chicken in oil and things like that. I'd ask them really strange. They'd be like, yeah, like
maybe
what else? Like, so I was still very, very, I was recovered, but I wasn't fully recovered at that point. So yeah, I went to camp and I really struggled to eat around people. I found that really, really uncomfortable.
Did you? Just having your normal...
Yeah, so like I just didn't... I thought people would be looking at me thinking, God, she doesn't need to eat that. Like, why is she
Did anyone pick up on that?
I was very selective of who I ate around. And I think I'd spent so long with people commenting on what I was eating that it was just easier for me to eat on my own. But obviously going to camp, you ate with the campers, so it was very like, you just had to eat with everyone, and I've really struggled with that. So I would struggle to eat with them, so I'd eat quite little, but then that caused me to like binge when I wasn't around people because I was just so hungry. But also there was this fear of like, I'm on my own, I need to get in as much food as I can because I don't know when I'm going to be on my own again. So I would just like panic eat a lot of the time. So I actually
around food.
Yeah. So I actually gained quite a lot of weight when I went to America and did Camp America, which when my parents came out to see me, they were super happy.
Over the moon.
But actually I was fighting this whole new internal battle that binge eating is still an eating disorder, and it's just as unhealthy and as detrimental to your health as any other eating disorder.
Alice, binge eating and making yourself sick, do they go hand in hand?
So bulimia is essentially binge eating and then making yourself sick. Binge eating alone is just eating and not getting rid of it.
And do people have a disorder of just binge eating?
Yeah.
They do?
Yeah, because at that point I had stopped making myself sick, mainly because of Holly passing away. I had a real fear around making myself sick, and so I didn't really do that as much. But then I was felt out of control around food, and there was just so much of it in America as well, and everything was just so like overwhelming that I just ended up eating a lot.
You're eating a lot. Are you then, I'm just trying to process this, are you then looking in the mirror and going, oh my gosh? Or
at the time it was kind of, I was actually quite positive about my weight gain at that point.
Right.
And I think this is where social media is sometimes, you know, you only see what people post. I was posting things of me in a bigger body and saying like, this is what it looks like when you're living your life, like I'm traveling, I'm doing this, and to the outside world people were like, oh my god, she's recovered, this is great.
Yeah. And
but
so
I was fighting this,
feedback was positive.
Yeah, but I was fighting this whole new battle inside of like, I can't stop eating, but I didn't want to tell anyone that, because again, I think it's easier when you're in a smaller body, and I think there's this kind of, like I say, this romanticizing of anorexia, of like, oh, this tiny petite girl, when actually if you hear someone say, I've got binge eating disorder, the stigma around it is like, oh, you're just greedy. And that's what I thought people would think of me. They'd just think, oh, she just needs to stop eating. Like, it's not a disorder, is it? She's just greedy.
So you almost...
It's like do a 180. It was like, went the opposite way. And it's quite common in anorexia, because you've restricted for so long and you start allowing yourself to eat these foods. Like, I've not eaten these foods in so long, and then if you add America onto that, and there's all these incredible foods, and I was just out of control around it. Like, I'd have one bit and I just couldn't stop.
What I pick up on this little conversation we've just had now is you, I don't mean you, but it's like you think people judge you, not as a person, not, oh, isn't she lovely, isn't she, on what you're eating.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was very, very hyper-fixated on it, and I was very hyper-fixated on what other people were eating, and I was actually quite judgmental at the time. And
would you say things to people?
Not my friends, I never really said anything to friends, but my parents, I'd be like, oh, like, you're going to eat that. I was very judgmental around food, but it was Anna, not me.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So it's that like differentiation of the two.
It's just
my eating disorder was very judgmental of other people and what they were eating. But equally in the other way, if I saw someone not eating, I'd get really funny about it and be like, you need to eat. Like, so it was very like hard for me.
Why?
I think it came from two places. Of one, how I spoke about it being the identity. Like, I'm the girl that doesn't eat. This is my thing. Why are you not eating? But also from a place of Alice going, please eat, because don't put yourself through what I've been through. Like, it's not worth it.
So we're caring on one side,
and then like I say, it's like the angel and the devil on your shoulder all the time, of these two voices fighting against each other constantly. So I have struggled quite a lot with that. But it's quite common, like I say, with anorexia sufferers, they call it like overshooting. So it's kind of, you're very underweight, most will then gain weight and become very overweight, and then they'll lose a little bit again and find that happy medium. Which is what happened eventually.
You would live with this for the rest of your life, right?
I think so, yeah. I can't ever see me changing.
And does anybody rid themselves of this illness, do you think, or do you think...
A lot of people that I've spoken to are kind of in the same mindset of me, of they always live with it, but it's about you learning to control it and manage it. And I think that's the best way that I can describe it. The only people that I've actually heard that say they feel fully recovered is like mums when they have a baby, because their body isn't theirs anymore and they don't care about what they look like. It's about providing for their baby.
That sort of makes sense, doesn't it?
And people that have had children are like, I just don't even think about it anymore. Like, it's not for me anymore. My body is like, you know,
it's almost like there's another person.
Relying on your body. Your body needs fuel to look after your baby. So you just kind of overcome it.
That's really interesting, actually.
But a lot of people sort of, I would say my age, that I speak to just say that we learn to live with it and manage it.
And you know what, naively, I think me going back, would think this was a girl thing. It isn't, is it?
That's a big
Is
misconception.
that I know,
Yeah,
and I feel
huge
really ignorant
misconception.
saying that.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we're all a little bit guilty of it, but is it as common in boys, men as
Yeah,
it is?
Yeah, it's as common, but it's just a lot of boys will go without a diagnosis, so that's why it looks
Will
like
they?
a more. Yeah, it takes a lot more for a boy or a man to go and say that they're struggling with an eating disorder. So in the actual numbers of sufferers is the same, but on paper females is a lot higher, just because we go for help because it's seen as a female
thing. This is probably a bit of a big ask, and I touched on it earlier, and you might not be able to answer, Alice, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if a parent,
Mm-hmm.
brother, sister said to you, what signs do I need to look for?
Yeah.
Can you answer that, or can you help in any way of?
I think my biggest thing is like looking for changes in behaviour. So like I spoke about, kind of, you know, if they cut things out, or a lot of it now, especially in the world of like vegan, gluten-free, all of that, like if you're doing that for a health reason, that's different. But a lot of people, like I say, with Lent and things, they'll use those things to cover up eating disorders. So I think it's just looking for a change in behaviour, but also just like a change in mood.
Because the last thing I want to do here when you leave here, Alice, is when some poor child says to their mum, I'm doing Lent, and their mum jumps on them and gets them in a headlock and says, no, you're not.
No, you're not.
But, you know, and that's that I'm just making humour out of something that isn't funny at all. But, so signs like
just like
eating pattern changing.
Yeah, like patterns changing. Like I would always say like, oh, I've already eaten, or, you know, oh, I'm eating later with blah blah or something, or like just changes in their personality. Like,
So do you think mood swings came
oh,
into it?
100%, because when you're not eating and you're hungry, like, you know how you are when you've missed one meal, like, I don't know about you, you get hungry, but it's on a whole new level of like, I was just a different person. Like, my parents would say, like, we don't recognise you anymore. Like, all of the things that I'm always known as being like quite bubbly, outgoing, chatty, you know, like all the time for people, but I just didn't have time for anyone. I was snappy, I was rude, I was secretive. So all of those things, like just your general,
which I hate to say, a lot of parents will say my child's like that all the time.
Yeah.
You know that age that kids go,
yeah.
that teen.
Yeah.
But
it's more of like if there's a big change, like if there's changes, and like and like more of the secrecy around sort of like eating and when they're eating, saying they're eating later, or saying they're not hungry, or saying they'll make themselves something later, but not actually following that up kind of thing.
And I guess going to the bathroom after dinner.
Yeah,
time,
so
you
that
don't
was
be
a big
in there
thing.
too long, maybe.
Yeah, like trips to the bathroom once they've eaten, or like if they're like taking, I mean, it's hard to like police that, because obviously you don't know if they're taking medication and things like that, but like I've become very, like I said before, very obsessed with like the latest fad or the latest trend, like the pills that you can take that are like blocking carbs or fat burners and all of that jazz. Like every pill that was sold for like weight loss, I was like, well, I need to have that. I must have that as well. So yeah, just looking out for those little signs. But I think the biggest thing for me is like, don't push it. And I say plant seeds. So, you know, like it might be that it takes a little while for them to admit that they've got a problem. And even just saying like, oh, like I've noticed that this, like, do you want to eat dinner with me? Would you like to come and sit with me? Is there something that you'd like to eat that feels comfortable or safe? Because I had a lot of safe foods, so like things for me that just weren't triggers, and I'd kind of say like, oh, I need to have XYZ for dinner tonight, and then that would be a sign to my mum that I'm struggling. So just like little things that it might be like, let's do this together, rather than, because I found it really hard to like eat on my own because I'd feel like I'm being greedy.
What about shopping together, doing the food shop?
Yeah, doing the food shop together, like buying foods that they feel comfortable with. And I think at the beginning that's really important. I think as you go through recovery, there becomes a time when it's, we used to call them fear foods, and you do like challenges. And I always say like, it sometimes might have taken me 6 weeks to say, it might have been like, oh, I don't know, for example, if, I don't know, a salt and vinegar crisp was a fear food of mine, it might be that I might say to my parents, like, I'm going to go and buy a packet of crisps. I might not eat them, but even that act of going to buy them and having them in the house is such a big step. So you have to really look at those little steps and see them as wins and say, I'm really proud of you for going to buy that item of food that's a fear, and not be like, well, you've bought it and not eaten it. You know, it's really hard, it's really easy to go, well, you've not eaten it, so that's not a win. But actually just having those foods in the house is a big step. So just like celebrating those little recovery wins. And then it might even be that like I opened the bag and had some on my plate. Again, I might not touch them, but they're on my plate, and that was huge. So it's just really celebrating those little wins. I saw a video of a friend of mine, and their little girl was sitting down, and he said to her, like, what's your favourite part of your body? And she said, my tummy. And he was like, why is your tummy your favourite? And she was like, I don't know, I just really like my tummy. So I think it's just about like speaking positively about your body, and like, you know, just because keeping that innocence of like, your body is your home, and like, as cliche as it sounds, like, you only get one, like, you've got to look after it. And
I was just going to say,
celebrating bodies of all shapes and sizes. It's not about what you look like, it's about how you're treating it and how you're looking after yourself. And you know, there's lots of things that you can do to keep healthy, and there isn't one size and there isn't one body that is
it's all about
healthy.
being healthy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not the size, not.
But I think just not commenting on someone's body, and I find it quite difficult because we live in a world and in a society where weight loss is celebrated. Like, the minute somebody has lost a bit of weight, you go, oh my god, you look amazing.
Yeah.
And they might have lost weight because of an illness, because they're stressed, because they can't afford food.
The heartbreak diet.
The heartbreak diet,
you know
like,
what I mean?
they might not be able to afford food, and like, you've congratulated something that might not actually be positive.
Yeah.
And actually, for me, putting on weight was important, but nobody would congratulate that normally, you know?
Yes, I know exactly.
So
what you mean.
it's kind of like, I just don't think that that's something that you should focus on. If someone's like looking, if someone's outwardly going, I need to lose weight to be healthy, say to them, like, you look really healthy, you look like you've got more energy, like, you look like you're doing really well, like, I've seen you lifting that weight, or oh, I saw that 5k run you did the other day, that's amazing. Like, comment on what their body is doing rather than what it looks like.
Which you're saying that brings it on to, you are a PT now, aren't you?
I am.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, so once I got myself better, I always had this goal, like I said, of helping people. And when I first came out of my recovery, I got myself into a gym. This was actually post-lockdown when I said I had my relapse, and I wanted to build up some strength again because I knew that I'd lost an unhealthy amount of weight and I wanted to do it the right way. So I actually joined a gym, and it kind of just snowballed from there. And I was like, I loved lifting weights, and I was teaching at the time. I was a primary school teacher, and I did actually want to go into personal training, but I didn't feel ready, because I think it's really important that if I'm around an industry that unfortunately is still very body focused,
100%.
I needed to make sure that I was in a space where I wouldn't be triggered by people talking about weight loss, by people talking about, you know, the diet that they're on and things like that. And so I had to make sure, so it's only been in the last couple of years that I've like gone into this as a career now, because I felt like I was in a position where I was able to manage it.
This is personal. I don't expect you to. Have you come across anyone that you think may have an eating disorder that you have PT'd?
I haven't personally PT'd them, but I've had a lot of people message me, because if anyone follows my Instagram, they'll see that I speak about my experiences and stuff, and I always get quite a lot of people messaging me, sort of asking for advice and asking how I got myself out of it. So I think I haven't personally coached anyone because that's out of my scope. As much as I have personal experience of an eating disorder, to work with someone who has an eating disorder is way beyond my scope. I can help someone with their mindset and things like that. So I'm also a nutrition coach as well.
I'm sitting here thinking that's what you need to do though. I feel like you should be a public speaker, and you should, because you've experienced it, and you know, I'm not saying it because you've come across so well today. You've educated me. I'm sure you've massively educated everyone at home as well. Like you make it easy to understand. Does that make sense? Because not unless we've all experienced it, we don't. But I feel like hard, I know so much more now. So I'm really advocating you need to become a public speaker.
Maybe one day. But I think, as I say, like, to actually work with someone with an eating disorder, if they've been diagnosed with an eating disorder, you have to have certain qualifications,
right.
And you have to be like a psychiatrist or something, which is obviously way beyond my scope. But I'm always happy from a personal and anecdotal perspective. Like, I've had a lot of people reach out to me, and I've been able to help them. I was going to say that. So if any of the viewers, anyone that's watching this, watched it, can they reach out to you? Can
absolutely. We put your social media?
Yeah, of course.
And you know that if they need any help, that's lovely. Because I'm sure there will be.
Because I think, you know, you can go to people that you feel safe to, but if they're, like you say, if you've not had an eating disorder, it can be really hard to understand. And I've had people say things to me, or I've said things, and they're like, you get it, like you resonate, like you understand what I mean when I say that. Because a lot of the things that I'd sometimes say, from a rational standpoint, I know that they're completely crazy.
Yeah.
But for someone with an eating disorder, they're like, I completely understand what you mean by that.
And God forbid they end up in the same doctor's surgery as you did, telling you that you didn't meet the criteria.
It's really, it makes me really sad, but we still unfortunately do have a long way to go with eating disorder treatment. People die every day because of an eating disorder, because the support isn't there.
It's such a waste, isn't it?
There's a very limited amount of beds in inpatient, so only the very sick get a bed. And I always say, like, when I got turned away for help, there's no other illness where you would get turned away for help. Like, if you, I don't know, if you had stage 1 cancer, they don't say to you, actually come back when it's stage 4, then we'll do your chemo.
Then you can talk.
We'll start your chemo now, because it makes sense to treat it when it's not as advanced.
Before this goes too far.
And I think a lot of the campaigns and a lot of the government work, and I know I follow a lot of people that are trying to, there's actually a big campaign called Ditch the Scales, and it's all about getting rid of weight and BMI within the eating disorder treatment.
And you know what, Alice, I don't know, you know, your whole situation at home and your relationship with your parents. They sound great, but some people haven't even got that, have they? You know, there's girls out there, boys out there with eating disorders that haven't got anyone to turn to, haven't got anyone noticing, or hold on a minute. And like you say, the education, the support isn't there. Where do these poor people go?
There isn't really anywhere at the moment.
It's awful.
Yeah, I know that there's a big thing about trying to get more sort of like hubs, so places for people to go where it necessarily isn't a doctor's a surgery, because obviously, again, I think there was a stat that I shared once, within doctors' practice, and when they do their degree, they get 2 hours of eating disorder, like within,
and that's it?
So there's no actual help there. So like I remember once when I went to one of my appointments, I said to a doctor, I've been told that I need to drink the glass of milk 3 times a day, and her response was, I wouldn't be able to drink that much milk. Like, how is that helpful to someone who is trying and needs that to survive? And she's like, I'd struggle to drink that much milk. Like, there was just no,
that's awful. I remember being in doctor's surgery once, not long ago, and I went about menopause, completely going off track, but she looked at me, she went, I don't know, let me Google it. And I thought,
it's crazy.
Right, you're the menopause doctor and I'm sitting with you.
I could have Googled that.
I can Google. Like,
I thought I was getting some actual professional
I'm not taking it, I'm just saying.
No, and it's scary because there's so many things out there that are just so misunderstood or not well researched, and it's just, if people are at crisis and they're going to these people and they don't have an understanding of the severity of it, because like eating disorders and anorexia is the biggest mental health killer, so it has the most deaths, anorexia, because it's just so like undiagnosed and
it's sort of
misinterpreted and
brushed under the
carpet,
yeah.
and you know, there's a lot of things with like non-compliance, so people get pushed out of treatment if they're deemed non-compliant.
Well, I'm going to be cheeky now. If there's any mums out there that would like to reach out, and I say mums, dads, family members, friends that would like some advice, can they reach out to you, or where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if I can give any insight, then I definitely will. So the easiest place is probably Instagram. So my Instagram is at Alice Brackley Coaching, which is my coaching name as well. So obviously, if anyone needs any help with like PT or nutrition, or if they are struggling with an eating disorder, I can't give medical advice on the eating disorder, but I can definitely come at it from a lived experience.
Been there, seen it,
done that. So
because you're a PT now, so
yeah.
You also train people. Can they reach out to you for training?
Yeah, if they want to reach out for training. I like focus on sort of like strength training now, so you know, the toned body that we all want doesn't come from hours of cardio, so I've kind of switched my training to like longevity, so it's what I focus on with clients as well. So if anyone wants to reach out and have some training, then I have space for that as well.
Fantastic. Well, I've really enjoyed today, and I think I've learned so much. So firstly, I want to say thank you so much for being, you know what, I could listen to you for hours. I could actually sit on here, turn the cameras off and carry on talking, but thank you, because I think you come across girl next door, as in you just explain it, you just make it make sense, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'm possibly going to get you back on at some point, because I feel like there's still so much that I need to know. Yeah, there's so much. But thank you so much for joining That's Another Story podcast.
Thank you for having me as well.
So welcome. I will be back again next week at That's Another Story. Please subscribe on my YouTube channel, Amazon, Spotify and Apple. Follow me on social media, Lisa Andrews, and I will see you all next week. Thank you for joining us.